Thank you, Ms. Branstad. Rebuttal, Mr. Bull.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court?
Counsel.
I recognize I'm standing between all of you and lunch, but I would beg your patience for a few moments. It's baseball season. Everyone hopes their team's going to win, and it reminds me of a story I heard just a few years ago. It was a game being played out in the Northeast, and I believe it was a state championship game, high school level. It was the bottom of the ninth, tied score, bases loaded. Well, if you know anything about baseball, you know that if the home team scores in that situation, the game's over, they've won. So if you're the visiting team, you got to stop them from scoring and hope you have a chance to win it in extra innings. Full count on the batter, bases loaded. Pitcher goes in the windup, runner on third breaks for home. Pitcher throws a strike. It's framed by the catcher. He steps forward and he applies the tag. The umpire calls safe. The home team's ecstatic. They just won the state championship. But there's a cry from the dugout, the visiting team's manager. Hey, Blue, referring to the umpire. What was the pitch? And it's a great question. Because if that pitch is a strike, this batter's out. And it doesn't matter whether or not the run scored or not. In interviews after the fact, the umpire said, I missed the pitch. Through all the dust and confusion caused by the runner breaking for the plate, I lost focus on what we were looking for. And I listened to Ms. Branstad's closing argument. It made me think of that story. Because we've heard all throughout this case, there is a difference between an evidence-based investigation and a suspect-based investigation. And you heard from Joe Kennedy, you want to do an evidence-based investigation. Now, what have we heard over and over again? There's an important instruction, and Judge McCall read it to you multiple times. The statements made to law enforcement by these third parties should not be accepted as the truth of the matter asserted. Now, that's fancy law talk, written by a bunch of lawyers. But what does it mean? And I got to tell you, as I sat here, I couldn't help but notice a lot of you guys were writing down what those people said. And that's fair. But the only point of that evidence is to show whether or not law enforcement followed up. You should not consider that evidence to determine whether or not one person said one thing or something else. Because that's not what that evidence was used for. And that's why the judge gave you that instruction over and over again. The question is, did law enforcement follow up on the leads? Now, for the alternative suspect theory to fly, you have to believe this wasn't a staged burglary. It can't be both. It's either a staged burglary, which means a stranger didn't commit it, or it's an alternative suspect case. So what did law enforcement do? They kept their eye on the evidence, not the dust and confusion. Now, that's not to say they didn't follow up on the leads. And it's almost amazing whenever you hear, if law enforcement follows up on the leads, even up until this past Sunday, somehow that means they're not doing their job. They should have done it sooner. Now, we would love to live in a perfect world where all of these people have known addresses and we can talk to them, and that's not an excuse. They're the cops. They got the guns, the badges. They can find people. Don't get me wrong. But every single one of those things that Special Agent Ludwig told us was, what I'm being told doesn't match the evidence at the scene. So how many rabbit holes do you go down? How much white noise is created? And I got multiple cameras on me right now. Every single time this case goes onto the news, guess what? More people call in. Who needs a deal? Who needs to get their kids back?
Objection. Your Honor, may we approach?
We heard Special Agent Ludwig tell us that the dust and confusion that was created by the media, by way of that you could Google things, you could look things up, that's the type of information that causes this type of stuff to occur. That's all I'm trying to say. So what does that mean for us? It means that we can hunt for doubt. You could all be deputized as the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th through 17th defense attorney in this case. But that's not what the jury instruction tells you. It tells you you assess the evidence. You have to believe one of two things. And there are only two choices. You have to believe that a stranger walked in, went downstairs into a dimly lit basement, took a gun among others that are there, walked upstairs, then bypassed Shirley Carter's purse, bypassed the drugs in the cabinet, bypassed all the other guns, and then shot her. Doesn't match the evidence at the scene. So we can follow down the rabbit holes, or we can keep our eye on the prize, which is the evidence of the case. And that's what law enforcement did in this case. Now, I told you at the very beginning, there were errors, there were missteps. I'd love to have the crime scene not to have forgotten a grenade, for example, or got the gun the first time. But that never changes the facts as they exist before the evidentiary misstep. It simply doesn't. So I do want to spend a few moments, if I could beg your attention, just to talk about some of the things that I think are important. What time did Jason Carter get there? Clearly, I was not clear what my argument was, because Ms. Branstad said I said Jason Carter had only been there for 3 minutes or whatever it was. Let me try again. Give me a do-over. What I'm saying is, the time Jason Carter claims he got to the house doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. If he hops out of his truck and goes straight inside, he can't be getting there a few minutes before 11:08. I'm not talking about the time between he calls Jana Lane and the time he calls 911. I'm saying about that between the time he arrived and the time he calls his sister. According to his times, that trip should take 49 to 58 minutes. His times. He left at 9:59. He doesn't call his sister to 11:08. We don't have to play fuzzy math here. He's there 10 to 17 minutes before. And why is the text message important? Because he's the one who says over and over again, I sent it from Heberlin's. If he sends it from Heberlin's, he's waiting in their driveway 8 minutes before he sends a text message. Does that make any sense whatsoever? The point is, Jason Carter has a ton of unattended time, which simply doesn't make any sense. Now, what else did we hear? You guys have heard all the evidence. But the bottom line is here, Brad Kaufman, check your notes, does say Jason Carter tells him two important facts. Grease the zerts, bedroom ransacked. If you, when you check your notes or rely on your memory, recall Brad Kaufman sitting in this chair, Jason Carter is guilty as charged. Because what did we hear? Bill just went in and grabbed his gun, checked to see if the gun was still there, came back out. There is no testimony, zero, zilch, that Bill Carter knew the bedroom was ransacked. Because he didn't. He went up, checked the gun, came back, went right back to his wife. Shot in the side. The hole's here in her shirt. You'll see the photo. Now, we can talk about, well, he was saying there was blood on the side. No, the conversation's about being shot in the side. We want to talk about time of death. Again, it's simply garbage in, garbage out. But what do we know about the facts? The burn barrel's still burning. The pigs are eating. There's no fecal matter in those photos. The bedding isn't disrupted. If those facts are true, Shirley Carter wasn't dead an hour ago. Just didn't work that way. It can't be. This is an example where their doctor's absolutely right. This ain't an absolute science. That's his testimony. I'm going to just simply end with this. Why did Shirley Carter come up? Because it was getting towards 11 and she fixes lunch. If she interrupts a burglary and people are in the office in the back bedroom, she doesn't get shot in the side with the shooter at the door. Doesn't happen. You got to believe someone went downstairs, found a gun in that basement, came back upstairs, shot her instead of walking out the door, and then didn't take her purse and simply walked up, pulled the papers off the desk, knocked a file cabinet over, which would have blocked his exit, then walked into a bedroom, not taking her jewelry, take gift cards out, and drop some socks on top. It's not an interrupted burglary. I leave you with this. It's coming up on Easter. I have some older ones, but when they were little, I hated Easter egg hunt time. Just going to level with you, not my favorite thing. Because you'd walk around with your child, and you'd hope that they find the eggs, right? And so you'd walk by, you'd be holding the hand, and then, of course, you walk by where you know the egg is underneath the plant. So you go back. And for me, it would be, Tyler, look again. Do you see something underneath that flower or underneath that plant? Oh, there's an Easter egg there. Look at what Jason Carter tried so hard to do on June 19th. He tried so very hard to lead his father to reach the conclusion the house has been ransacked. It's a burglary gone bad. Mom's been shot. Think critically about the evidence. What happens? His sister says, a shooting makes no sense in rural Lacona, Iowa. That doesn't happen in my world. It doesn't happen there. Maybe the water heater went off. Jason doesn't say water heater. It's, let's go downstairs and see if one of your guns went off. At some point he says rifle, other times he says guns. Why does Jason Carter want to lead his father downstairs? What's down there? But Dad doesn't pay attention to the fact that the rifle, the .270, isn't there. Dad turns around and goes back upstairs. So now what is it? Dad, looks like sons of bitches killed Mom. You've been robbed. Go check if your pistol's there. Now remember, Jason Carter doesn't know where his dad keeps his guns. And that's what's always been so interesting. If you listen to Jason Carter, the guns are located underneath the bed in the spare bedroom, his old bedroom. But when we're going to go look to see where the rifle is, we should go downstairs and check. So Dad goes into his bedroom where he knows that handgun is kept. Why is he sending him into that room? He knows that revolver's a .22. If Jason Carter knows so clearly that's such a big hole, why is it important for Dad to go check to see if the .22's there? So he sends him in there so he hopes he finds that the bedroom's been ransacked. But once again, Jason isn't holding Bill's hand as he's walking through there. So what happens next? Look, Dad, the office has been robbed. But Bill isn't putting it together. He doesn't care. His wife is dead. So then what happens? James Lane shows up. James Lane shows up. James knows Jason Carter. They work together at Motor Inn. And what does he say within mere minutes of James arriving? You can listen to it. Wonder if they took one of my dad's guns, shot her, and left with it. But James doesn't pay attention to it. So now they go through the interview at Pleasantville. And now Jason Carter is being driven down to the police station, the sheriff's office for his major case prints, right? And what's he say in the back of the car? I told James. And he wouldn't even go check. Dad wouldn't even go check. Jason Carter is doing everything in his power to get his dad to reach the same conclusion he has. But Bill doesn't see it. Why does Jason Carter know information only the shooter would know? If you believe this is a staged burglary, then all of the names and stuff they put up on the board is irrelevant. Because burglars commit burglaries. Then you have to reach the conclusion, did the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there are only two people who knew what happened that day? One of them's dead, and the other one's sitting in that chair. Form of verdict number 2, find him guilty as charged.
Thank you, Mr. Bull.